welcome back to my channel TC&T, which stands for True Crime and Trials. And today I'm carrying on with the Groves trial, and today is day 2. There is one witness before Patricia Kraft comes back up to give her full testimony from yesterday. So I'll do that witness, then I'll do Patricia, and I might have to end the video there because her testimony is so long. So the day 2 might be in 2 parts, but I'll see how long I've been talking for when I've come to the end of hers, and I'll take it from there. So first up is Dr. Adams, and he's an obstetrician at the hospital where Jessica gave birth, and he assisted in Jessica's labour and birth. And he wasn't actually at the hospital when she arrived. He was at home on call, so because of the complications with the drugs and everything, they called him in because he's specifically on call for he also is an obstetrician specifically there for non-prenatal care births, which means he deals with women who are giving birth who haven't got any record or haven't been to any prenatal appointments. He said he did ask Jessica questions, but she didn't answer many of them and seemed distant, which seems to tally up with what the midwives and nursery staff had said yesterday. He noticed that her demeanour was not that of a woman about to give birth, because she didn't have pain relief and she didn't seem in pain like, you know, the average woman would. And he said he found it odd. Before knowing that Jessica had been on drugs, his opinion was that she had, because of how she was acting. So he kind of sussed that, you know, she was under the influence. He just didn't know for sure. He did treat the hemorrhaging that Jessica had a few hours after the birth, and then he is given Dylan's identification record, which has his little footprint on it, and it says he weighed £5 10 ounces and he was 19 inches long, and there were no injuries to baby Dylan during or after birth apart from the drug withdrawals. So the cross-examination from Jessica's attorney, he asked him what kind of questions he was asking Jessica about a past medical history, and the normal questions would be any medications she was currently on, any past medical and surgical history, or if she'd taken any illegal substances. Dr. Adams said that she was alert but not very responsive, and he didn't know while he was delivering Dylan that he was premature, because obviously they had no records and Jessica wasn't saying anything, and neither was Daniel. And Daniel's attorney asks whether Dr. Adams spoke to Daniel during the birth, and he said he doesn't recall having any direct conversation with Daniel. So now we're on to the big one, which is Patricia Kraft. She started her testimony yesterday, and again she doesn't want to be filmed or on camera at all. So she's the woman from Children's Services, and she starts again by saying that they had agreed if Daniel passed a drug test, then Dylan would be placed back into his custody, but as long as Jessica wasn't in the home. So now they go back to the activity log. The activity log is everything that was logged and dated throughout the time that Dylan was born, up until obviously he went missing, and then he was found again. She said to their knowledge, Daniel had a steady job and had no problems with drugs. He also indicated that in any circumstances his children would come first and his children were his top priority. And when Daniel did his drug test, Children's Services will do their own drug tests when Daniel went into the building where Children's Services is, but he wasn't accompanied into the toilet. Nobody was watching him pee into the cup, basically. She said she stood outside the door and had the door cracked, but nobody saw him actually do it. But they do have temperature sensitive cups which registered the body temperature, and they were all fine. She is asked about the conditions that Daniel has to stick to be able to have custody and keep custody of Daniel, and they are: he would have to work with Children's Services. There would be weekly contact with Children's Services. If Children's Services contacted him and left a message, he would have to call them back. Jessica had to receive drug treatment, and Jessica could not be in the home except for supervised visits. Daniel had to remain employed and not have any drug issues. And the parents should apply for any public benefits that applied to them, such as food stamps. Daniel and Jessica assured Child Services that these conditions would be met. On the 24th of January, there was a family meeting with Patricia, another caseworker, Andrea Bowling, who was the foster mum of Dylan, and Jessica and Daniel. It was the first time that Patricia had met them, and she said they were 15 minutes late. There was no plan for Jessica and Daniel's other child, Daniel Jr. And Daniel Jr. had told Child Services that he'd never seen his parents do anything in front of them. He'd not seen them do drugs or anything. At the meeting, the conditions they had to meet were discussed. A referral was made to Help Me Grow and to a place called Mahajan, which is like a drug therapy centre. Daniel had another drug test, and again he wasn't supervised inside the bathroom, and it came back negative. Daniel and Jessica had a visitation with Dylan at the Child Services building, and for a time Andrea Bowling was in there with them, and she thought Jessica was loopy, as in she was on drugs. When Daniel went to pick up Dylan to take him home, he was late again. So after they'd had the visitation, obviously Daniel must have met all the criteria that it had to get custody of Dylan again. So Andrea had to take Dylan back to Child Services, and then Daniel came to pick him up, but he was late again. I've lost my place now. Patricia conducted a home visit on the 4th of February. Jessica and Daniel were at the home with Dylan, and Daniel Jr. was at school. Jessica was told that she had to continue with drug counselling until further notice and go to drug court. There were no issues with the home. She saw Dylan and he was wearing a long sleeve sleep suit, and Jessica was holding him. Patricia did not hold him or check him over. She didn't hold him herself and give him a good look over and move him or anything. And she couldn't visually see if there were any injuries on Dylan. She said Dylan was quiet, but Jessica was burping him. Following this visit, Child Services tried numerous times to contact Daniel. They even went to Daniel Jr.'s school to give him a note to pass on to his dad to get him to call them. On the 25th of February, Patricia managed to be able to conduct a monthly visit to the Groves, and Dylan appeared clean and appropriately dressed. But Daniel didn't acknowledge getting any notes from Patricia, but I don't think she asked either. Dylan had been weighed and measured, and at the time he weighed £8 9 ounces and was 22 inches long, so obviously he'd grown and put on weight. There were no issues or concerns, and Daniel told Patricia that Jessica was there through the day, but she wasn't staying at night. But nobody checked up on this. Nobody from Child Services checked to see that Jessica left at night and wasn't staying there, so they just took Daniel's word for it. Again, Dylan was wearing a long sleeve sleep suit, and Jessica told Patricia that she was staying with family and friends, anywhere she could really get to stay. The next time Patricia was conducting the next monthly home visit was on the 18th of March, but she received a text from Daniel saying he was with his dad who'd had a heart attack. But that story wasn't confirmed at the time. The visit was rescheduled for the 21st of March. That visit didn't happen either. Patricia turned up, but there was no one home. When she got back to the office, she had a voicemail from Daniel saying his dad had got worse and he was still with him. So on the 27th of March, they had a hearing at juvenile court, and Jessica was there, but Daniel wasn't. And this meeting at the juvenile court was an adjudication hearing where the caseworker explains why they removed Dylan. Nobody asked why Daniel wasn't there. Patricia told Jessica that she would be at their house the next day, which would be the 28th of March. And she said she would be there at 8 a.m. She did go, and they were there, and she did see Jessica, Daniel and Dylan on that day. Again, Daniel didn't say why he wasn't in court. I'm not sure. No, she didn't. Patricia didn't ask either. Apparently, there's a lot of parents that don't attend the court appointments, and many of them don't explain why they don't attend. Jessica was feeding Dylan during the home visit, and he again was wearing a long sleeve sleep suit, and again he was quiet after he'd been fed. Jessica and Daniel both said they were keeping all appointments. There's way more to come. I mean, yesterday's trial was just so emotional. It was an awful day, but you do find out a lot more. Anyway, they both asked if Jessica would be allowed back in the home so she could bond with Dylan. Patricia said she had to speak to her supervisor before any of that could be arranged. Patricia also told them they had another court hearing on the 3rd of April. But before this, Patricia tried contacting Jessica on the 28th of March but got no response. She also texted Daniel asking him to call her. He texted back and said he would call her as soon as he got a signal, that he had been sitting with Jessica after the home visit. He said she had been to the bathroom and had a spell because of a UTI and was sick. They were trying to get her in to see a doctor, and he was taking her to the ER and would contact the caseworker. Apparently the cell signal is poor at the Groves residence, but you can pick it up if you're in certain spots, but this is the excuse they used constantly. And the reason why they spoke through text more than actual phone calls is because texts got through better because of the signal. Daniel didn't call back on that day or the next. The 3rd of April court hearing was moved to the 18th of April. And her next home visit was the 9th of April, and Daniel texted Patricia on the 4th of April and stated that everything was okay and going great. Now, we all know that poor baby Dylan was already gone. Daniel told Patricia he had been sick for a few days and Jessica was still battling with her UTI. They had also gone to visit somewhere and had got stranded and their car had broken down. So he asked to reschedule the home visit on the 9th and she agreed to go on the 17th of April. And she tried to contact him to tell him someone was coming to visit him on that day. Again, Daniel never reached out to anyone to say there was something wrong with Dylan, and no calls to 911 either. On 17th of April, she learned that Jessica had not been compliant with her drug therapy. Her last individual appointment was on the 8th of February, and the 26th of March was her last group appointment, even though that was part of her conditions that she had to attend everything. Every appointment, every meeting. At the next court hearing on the 18th of April, Jessica and Daniel didn't attend. Both their attorneys did, but they didn't. They were both texted on all the numbers that they had for both Jessica and Daniel, but they couldn't get hold of them. There was no response on the 19th of April, and then she got a text from Daniel saying he was still where they'd gone to visit previously, which was up north, and a friend was watching their home. But Patricia had also made an unannounced home visit with a colleague that morning, and she knocked on the door for several minutes. They looked around and she left a card in the mailbox and the door for him to call her. She didn't see anyone at the home. She then contacted Daniel's employer and they said he hadn't been working there since 2018. Daniel had told Patricia that Dylan was doing great and growing like a weed. Oh, this is a text that Daniel sent Patricia. And he said, Dylan was doing great and growing like a weed, LOL. I was going to contact you when I returned from this trip this weekend. My uncle come down and picked us up because my car is broken down and can't really drive my truck from hitting a deer. My friend is going to drive my truck this weekend. He also said in the text that he thought the next court date was 18th of May when it was actually the 18th of April. At this point, Patricia's starting to have concerns about how things are going. I mean, I think I might have had concerns right from the start, but she continued to try and make contact, and there were thoughts to remove Dylan from their care. They had already taken custody of Daniel Jr. on the 24th of April, because on the 23rd of April she visited the home again and no one was home. She left notes, and apparently the bathroom window was down. Motion detectors were making noise when they hadn't previously, and these motion detectors are at the top of the driveway. And there were items in the porch, and the porch was clean, meaning that it wasn't previously, so someone had obviously been there. So then Patricia went to the school to speak to Daniel Jr. She said he was nervous at first, but calmed down a bit later on. They asked him about Dylan, and he said he was fine. He was asked if his mum was staying at the house, and he said yes, occasionally. She told him again to ask his dad to contact her ASAP. She also asked about his dad's dad, as in Daniel Jr.'s granddad, who had had the heart attack, and Daniel Jr. said, "Who's that?" At that point, there were no plans for Daniel Jr., but after returning to the office, it was decided they were going to take custody of both children. So on the 24th of April, she rang the school and told them not to let Daniel Jr. go, and she would come and pick him up. They then placed Daniel Jr. with his aunt and uncle. His aunt and uncle had both been evaluated before he was placed with them. Obviously, when Daniel Jr. didn't arrive home, Daniel texted the aunt and uncle to ask. Oh no, he texted Patricia to ask why they took Daniel Jr. And the rest of the text said, I mean, come on, do you know what you are doing to him? This will affect his schoolwork, his whole life will be. I can't believe you took him. He never had nothing to do with any of the situation at all, and this is hurting him more than anything or anyone. Where is he anyway? On that same day, when she left the aunt and uncles and went back to the Groves, she went back to the Groves home because she wanted to explain about Daniel Jr. Nobody was home. But this time, the bathroom window was up and the living room window was down, and both cars were there. So, on the 26th of April, he texted to say he couldn't get to court because his friend had screwed him over and couldn't give him a ride there. More texts came with more excuses. She had texted him previously on the 25th of April to say she needed him to take Dylan's and Daniel Jr.'s stuff to the office. He texted Patricia and said he would bring Dylan the next morning. Obviously, he didn't. And on the 30th of April, she filed a missing persons report with the Sheriff's Department. On May the 1st, she received an email from Paediatrics to get in contact with them because they couldn't contact the Groves either. Dylan had needed urgent care because he'd had a newborn screening, and they test for all these conditions, and that it was actually a mistake, but he needed to be checked to make sure. So the paediatricians were trying desperately to get hold of them, but they couldn't. Patricia was continually texting on all numbers, trying to ring, contacting family members, anyone she could find. Nobody knew where they were, or she didn't get any answers. I mean, she really did try everything she could. She even went through phone books to try every person with the Groves surname. A caseworker and the sheriff went to visit the home again, but there was no answer. On the 7th of May, another attempt was made, and again on the 15th of May, again on the 23rd and the 31st of May, and on the 7th of June. Meanwhile, she was still trying to contact everybody, and so were the sheriffs. On the 10th of June, the Groves were obviously apprehended and taken into custody. The Groves actually told law enforcement that Child Services had taken Dylan months before, which, obviously was a lie. And the last time Patricia saw Dylan was on the 28th of March. And as Patricia said this, you hear a voice crack. And she was aware that on the 12th of June, Dylan's body was recovered. So on to the cross-examination from Jessica's attorney. Now, I really don't like this guy. He's very patronising and very condescending. And, I've watched a few trials now and I've yet to find a defence attorney I actually like, but this guy is just horrible. So he points out that Patricia hadn't actually completed her full training while she was handling this case, So think of that what you will. I still think she was qualified enough to handle this case, otherwise she wouldn't have been handling it. But so then he starts going through the activity log again, having her read it out. And you can tell that Patricia is on guard and she feels like she's being attacked by him. So he's asking her to read it out, and he keeps stopping her because she's not reading the exact words. And then it gets to the point where he asks the judge if he can get her to read it verbatim because it's not good enough. But the judge says, look, do your best, and a copy of this will be going to the jury anyway so they can read it for themselves. But he was really winding me up. He starts to show pictures of outside the residence and inside the residence, and then he shows a picture of a crib, which Patricia doesn't recognise, and he starts attacking her, saying, you said you checked every room, and she's saying, well, no, I didn't say I checked every room and I don't recognise that crib. He asks her how many cases she has at the time, and it was 23, and then he asks her if she's able to remember the details of Dylan's case from memory, such as what Dylan were wearing. Because obviously this was a year ago, and I don't think she's got all this written down in her report and the activity log. So her saying that she saw Dylan, every time she saw Dylan, he was in a long sleeve sleep suit, he's pointing out the fact that it's purely from her memory. And then now he brings up the fact that she didn't actually go over and check Dylan. When she went on the home visits, she didn't actually check him over. She just glanced at him from where she was sat. But she had put in her report that there were no hazards in the house. She didn't actually check every room. Patricia said that at one of the visits, she walked over to Dylan and noted his hair, how blue his eyes were, and that she touched his foot, and Dylan smiled. This is when Jessica's attorney turns round and basically says, well, you're a liar, because you didn't actually do that. At which point there's an objection, and he, it's sustained, and he's got to re-question. But he's totally trying to discredit Patricia's observations. Basically saying she's saying one thing and saying another, and then saying one thing when it's written a different way in the report. He asked her if she did her job to the best of her ability, and obviously she said yes. And the only thing she didn't do was bust the door down and find that baby. I mean, she's obviously traumatized by the whole thing, wishing she could do. I mean, I can't pretend to know what kind of job she has to do. I don't know the woman. I don't know how child services works there. But I'm not going to judge her based on this. I think everybody could say that they probably could have done more. Dylan shouldn't have gone back to them, but end of the day, there's a dead child, and the mother's admitted to killing him. So maybe it could have been avoided, maybe it could have been stopped, I don't know. So the cross-examination of Daniel's attorney, she starts by saying on the 25th of January a surprise drug test was performed on Daniel, which meant he had no prior knowledge it was coming up, so he couldn't, fake it. And she goes over the special temperature sensitive cups, and he did the test and it matched up with the correct body temperature, so he hadn't faked that one. She said when the Groves didn't attend court on the 27th of March, their attorneys had actually been in contact with them, so that's why the courts didn't actually make a big deal about them not attending it. When Daniel was avoiding her and not producing Dylan when he said he would, Patricia did suspect that Dylan wasn't alive, as this would be the only reason why he wouldn't produce Dylan. She said while conducting her home visit, she did observe a loving relationship between Jessica and Daniel. She said they seem very supportive of each other, and it said that they've been together 20 plus years. So, I've been talking for half an hour. I'm going to stop it there and do another. There's only one more witness, but I don't want to ramble on anymore, and I'll just tag him on to the... Oh no, there's actually one, two. Forget that. I'll come back with a part 2. So, and I hope all that made sense. There was a lot there, a lot of, you know, going to one date, then going back, and basically, you know, they put Dylan back into Daniel's care because he'd met all the conditions that they'd asked of him. Sorry, again, my screen froze. I don't know what's going on with this. I'm sorry if this looks so unprofessional. I really am. I'm really trying my best. So as I was saying, I hoped me reading out the notes from the testimony of Patricia Kraft made sense. Like I said, there was a bit of to and froing going from one date to another, and obviously, you know, Daniel had met the conditions, so they are all about reuniting children back with the family, and as far as they knew, they were sticking to everything. And obviously, you know, I don't know if they could have done more. I think she feels like she could have done more, but at the time, you know, when you've got to follow protocol and you can't just go busting doors down and taking children, it must be a really, really hard job. So I will see you in the next video with the rest of day 2's witness and testimonies. Okay, bye.